There is something no one tells you when you decide to build something big. Not your teachers. Not your friends. Not even the books that promise you success. They tell you to dream. They tell you to believe. They tell you to work hard. But they don't tell you what happens when everything starts falling apart. They don't tell you about the nights when you wake up at 3 a.m., your heart racing, your mind stuck on one question. What if I fail? Not just fail in business, but fail the people who trusted you. Fail the people who work for you. Fail your own family. Because the truth is, the hardest part is not starting. The hardest part is surviving. This is not a story about success. This is a story about struggle. In the world, there are thousands of books on management, leadership, and success. They talk about big goals. They talk about hiring great people. They talk about building strong organizations. And all of that sounds good, but something always feels missing. Because when you are actually in the middle of building something, when things are not going according to plan, when your company is close to breaking, none of those ideas help you. Because the hard thing is not setting a big goal. The hard thing is what happens when you don't reach it. The hard thing is not hiring great people. The hard thing is what happens when those great people start fighting, complaining, or expecting more than you can give. The hard thing is not creating a plan. The hard thing is getting people to actually follow it. And the hardest thing of all is waking up one day and realizing that there is no guide, no formula, no step-by-step process that can save you, because real problems don't come with instructions. This is the reality most people never see. From the outside, a company looks strong, successful, growing, but from the inside, it can feel like everything is breaking at the same time. People losing confidence, money running out, decisions getting heavier. And in the middle of all this, there is one person who cannot escape. The leader. Because when you are the one in charge, you don't get the luxury of confusion. Even when you don't know what to do, you still have to decide. Even when you are scared, you still have to act. Even when everything inside you says, stop, you still have to move forward. That is the burden no one prepares you for. This story is about a man who lived through that reality. Not once, but again and again. As an engineer, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and later, as someone guiding others through the same chaos. He did not write this to give you a perfect strategy, because he knows there is no perfect strategy. Instead, he shares something much more valuable. Experience, pain, mistakes, and the kind of lessons you only learn when things go wrong. Because building something from nothing is not a clean journey. It is messy, unpredictable, sometimes unfair, and often deeply personal. You will question your decisions. You will question your abilities. You may even question yourself. And yet, you keep going, not because you are sure you will succeed, but because stopping is not an option. There is one more truth you need to understand before we go deeper. In business, in leadership, in life, there will be moments when every option is bad. No matter what you choose, someone will be hurt. No matter what you do, there will be consequences. And in those moments, you will finally understand what this journey is really about. Not intelligence, not talent, not even hard work, but courage. The courage to decide when there is no right answer. This is not a comfortable story. It is not meant to make you feel safe. It is meant to prepare you. Because if you are building something, or dreaming of building something, you will face these moments. And when you do, you won't need motivation. You will need truth. So as you listen to this journey, don't just hear the words. See yourself in the situations. Ask yourself the hard questions. What would I do here? Would I have the strength to continue? Would I make that decision? Because this is not just his story. At some point, it becomes yours. And remember this, as we move forward, there are no easy answers. There are only hard things, and how you face them will define who you become. There is a strange thing about fear. It does not announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with warning signs. It quietly enters your life and starts shaping your decisions before you even realize it. As a child, you don't understand it. You just feel it. You feel it when you are surrounded by people you don't know. You feel it when you are expected to behave a certain way. You feel it when the world seems bigger than you, and you feel smaller than everything around you. And sometimes, that fear becomes your identity. You start believing, this is just who I am. A quiet person. A scared person. Someone who avoids difficult situations. But what most people don't realize is this. Fear is not permanent. It is just untested. Growing up in a world full of strong opinions, strong personalities, and constant noise can do two things to a person. It can either make them louder, or push them deeper inside themselves. When you are surrounded by people who already seem confident, already seem sure about everything, you begin to question your own voice. You begin to doubt your instincts. You start observing more than speaking, listening more than acting, and slowly, you become invisible. But invisibility has a hidden advantage. When you are not trying to impress anyone, you start seeing things clearly. You notice how people behave differently in different situations. You notice how confidence is sometimes just an act. You notice how people follow what others are doing without thinking. And without knowing it, you begin learning something very powerful. Perspective. There is a moment in life when you are forced to act. Not because you are ready, but because standing still is no longer an option. That moment does not feel heroic. It does not feel powerful. It feels uncomfortable. It feels uncertain. It feels wrong. Because you are stepping outside the version of yourself that feels safe. And in that moment, your mind starts racing. What if this goes badly? What if I embarrass myself? What if I regret this? But there is another voice. A very quiet one. It says, what if nothing bad happens? Most people never listen to that second voice. They walk away. They choose safety. They choose comfort. And slowly, they build a life around avoiding discomfort. But the people who change their lives, they do something different. They take one small step. Not because they are fearless, but because they are curious. That first step rarely goes the way you expect. Sometimes it surprises you. Sometimes it shows you that the thing you feared was never as dangerous as your mind made it. And sometimes it changes everything. Because in that one moment, you realize you are not controlled by fear. You are only influenced by it. And influence can be challenged. Life has a very interesting way of teaching lessons. It does not give you instructions. It gives you situations. And then it watches what you do. You can choose reaction, or you can choose understanding. You can judge quickly, or you can take time to see the full picture. And this choice, this simple choice, starts shaping who you become. There is another trap most people fall into. They believe what they see first. They trust their first impression, their first judgment, their first assumption. But reality is rarely that simple. People are more complex than they appear. Situations are deeper than they look. And truth is often hidden behind layers. If you react too quickly, you miss understanding. If you assume too early, you miss connection. And sometimes, you miss opportunities that could have changed your life. Think about this. How many times have people been judged before being understood? How many opportunities have been lost because someone didn't take one extra moment to think deeper? How many relationships never started because of one wrong assumption? This is not just about others. This is about you. Because the same way you judge others, you also judge yourself. I can't do this. I'm not ready. This is not for me. And just like that, you close doors without even trying to open them. But growth does not happen inside closed doors. It happens when you step into uncertainty. It happens when you allow yourself to be uncomfortable. It happens when you stop trying to control everything and start experiencing things. At some point, life will put you in situations where you don't have enough information. You won't know the full story. You won't have complete clarity. You won't feel ready. And still, you will have to decide. That is where real growth begins. Not when everything is clear, but when nothing is. And this is the first lesson. Not about business, not about leadership, but about life. You cannot build anything meaningful if you are controlled by fear, assumptions, and comfort. You have to question what you feel. You have to challenge what you believe. You have to step forward, even when it feels unnatural. Because the person you are right now is not the limit of who you can become. And as we move forward, you will see how these small moments, these quiet decisions, start shaping something much bigger. A mindset, a way of thinking, a way of facing problems. Because one day, those same lessons will be tested again. But not in small situations. In decisions that affect careers, companies, people's lives. And when that day comes, fear will return. But this time, you won't run. There comes a phase in life where learning is no longer soft. It becomes aggressive. Not the kind you get from books, but the kind that comes from wrong choices. Because until you make a mistake that costs you something, you don't truly understand responsibility. At the beginning of any career, everything feels exciting. New environment, new people, new possibilities. You feel like you're finally stepping into the real world. And in that moment, you believe one simple thing. If I work hard, things will work out. It sounds reasonable. It sounds fair. But reality does not operate on fairness. The truth is, effort is not always rewarded immediately. Sometimes you can do everything right and still end up in the wrong place. And this is where most people get confused. Because they were taught that hard work guarantees progress. But no one told them. Where you apply your effort matters more than how much effort you give. Imagine putting all your energy into something and slowly realizing it is going nowhere. Not because you are incapable, but because the direction itself is flawed. This is one of the most painful realizations. Because now the question is not, can I do this? The question becomes, should I even be doing this? And this is where most people get stuck. They continue, not because it is right, but because they have already invested time. They think, I've come this far. I can't stop now. But sometimes, continuing is the bigger mistake. Making a wrong decision is not the real problem. Staying in that decision, even after you see the truth, that is where damage begins. There is a silent pressure in life. A pressure to appear stable. To look like you have everything under control. To avoid changing direction, because it might look like failure. But what people don't understand is, changing direction is not failure. Ignoring reality is. At some point, life forces you to face this. You look around and realize, the people leading you don't know what they are doing. The system you trusted is broken. The path you believed in has no clear future. And suddenly, you feel trapped. This is not a comfortable place. Because now, there is no excitement left. Only doubt. You start questioning everything. Why did I come here? Did I make a mistake? What should I do next? And the hardest part, there is no one to answer you. This is where independence begins. Not financial independence. Not social independence. But mental independence. The moment you stop expecting others to guide your life. And start taking full responsibility for your choices. But responsibility is heavy. Because now, every decision is yours. If things go right, it's on you. If things go wrong, it's also on you. No excuses. No blaming. Just ownership. And ownership forces clarity. You start seeing things as they are, not as you want them to be. You start asking better questions. Not, what do people expect from me? But, what actually makes sense here? There is another challenge that appears at this stage. Distraction. Because when you are confused, anything that looks like opportunity feels attractive. New job, new idea, new path. Everything feels like a possible escape. But not every opportunity is real. Some are just distractions from making a hard decision. And the hard decision is usually this: should I stay, or should I leave? Leaving sounds simple, but it is not. Because leaving means uncertainty. No guarantee. No clear outcome. Just risk. And risk creates fear again. Now you are back where you started, facing fear. But this time, the fear is bigger. Because now, more is at stake. Your career. Your stability. Your future. So what do? You think. You analyze. You delay. You wait for the perfect moment. But here is the truth. The perfect moment never comes. At some point, you have to act without full clarity. You have to move, without knowing exactly where you will land. And this is what separates people. Not intelligence. Not talent. But the ability to act, in uncertainty. There is a powerful shift that happens here. You stop chasing comfort. You start chasing alignment. You ask, is this the right place for me to grow? Am I learning what actually matters? Is this moving me forward, or just keeping me busy? Because being busy is dangerous. It gives the illusion of progress. But in reality, you can be busy and still be stuck. Growth requires movement. And movement requires courage. The courage to leave something familiar and step into something unknown. And when you finally make that move, it doesn't feel like success. It feels like risk. It feels like instability. It feels like starting over. But something else happens too. Something quiet, but powerful. You begin to trust yourself. Not because you know everything, but because you know you can handle not knowing. This is the second lesson. You will not always be in the right place. You will not always make the right decision. But you must develop the ability to recognize reality and respond to it. Because life will not adjust to you. You must adjust to life. And as we move forward, things will get more intense. Because now, it's no longer just about your choices. It will become about your impact, your responsibility toward others, and the weight of decisions that don't just affect you. And when that begins, you will realize making decisions for yourself is easy. Making decisions for others, that's where the real pressure starts. There is a moment in life when ambition stops feeling like a dream and starts feeling like a burden. At first, ambition is exciting. It pushes you forward. It gives you energy. It makes you believe that you are capable of something bigger. You look ahead and see possibilities. A better career. A better life. A chance to build something meaningful. And for a while, that vision is enough. But then something changes. You move closer to real opportunities. You step into rooms where decisions are being made. You meet people who are building things, leading teams, creating impact. And suddenly, you are no longer watching from a distance. You are inside the game. And being inside feels very different. Because now you see what it actually takes. Not the outside image. Not the success stories. But the process. The confusion. The disagreements. The pressure. You realize something important. The people who look confident are often figuring things out as they go. The leaders who seem certain are dealing with doubts you cannot see. And the systems that appear strong are often fragile behind the surface. This realization can do two things. It can discourage you, or it can wake you up. Because now you understand. There is no perfect environment. No perfect company. No perfect leader. No perfect plan. Everything is being built, while it is already running. And this is where responsibility enters your life, in a new way. Not responsibility given to you, But responsibility you choose. You start thinking differently. Instead of asking, "What role do I have?" you begin asking, "What impact can I create here?" This shift is powerful, because once you start thinking this way, you can no longer stay passive. You begin to care more. You begin to notice problems. You begin to feel uncomfortable when things don't make sense. And that discomfort is important, because it pushes you toward action. But action is not always welcomed, especially when you are not the one in charge. When you speak up, you risk being ignored. When you challenge something, you risk being misunderstood. When you try to improve something, you risk creating tension. And now you face a new kind of fear. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of standing out. Most people avoid this stage. They stay quiet. They follow instructions. They do what is expected, because it is safe. But safety comes with a cost. You stop growing. You stop thinking deeply. You become part of the system, instead of shaping it. There is a different path. A harder one, where you choose to engage. You choose to question. You choose to contribute, even when it is uncomfortable. And this is where your identity begins to change. You are no longer just someone doing a job. You are becoming someone who takes ownership beyond your title. But ownership is not rewarded immediately. In fact, sometimes it creates problems. Because when you care more than others, you notice more than others. And when you notice more, you cannot ignore it. You start seeing inefficiencies, misalignment, decisions that don't make sense. And the hardest part, you realize that fixing these things is not simple. Because organizations are not machines. They are made of people. And people are complicated. They have opinions, egos, fears, motivations that are not always visible. So now the problem is not just, what is wrong? The problem becomes, why is it happening? And even deeper, how do you fix it, without breaking everything else? This is where many people get frustrated, because they expected logic, but they found complexity. They expected clarity, but they found ambiguity. And this is where maturity begins. You start understanding that problems are not always solved by intelligence. They are solved by patience, by observation, by timing. Sometimes the right decision, at the wrong time, becomes the wrong decision. And sometimes, doing nothing for a moment, is more powerful than reacting immediately. This is difficult to accept, because you want to act. You want to fix things. You want to prove yourself. But real impact is not about speed. It is about precision. Knowing when to step in, when to wait, when to push, when to step back. And slowly, you begin to develop something rare. Judgment. Judgment is not taught. It is built through experience, through mistakes, through observation, through reflection. And once you start developing judgment, you see the world differently. You stop reacting emotionally. You start analyzing situations. You stop looking for simple answers. You start accepting complexity. But this comes with a price. Because now, you can no longer pretend things are simple. You can no longer ignore reality. You can no longer blame others completely. You become aware. And awareness brings responsibility. At this stage, something else begins to grow inside you. Ambition evolves. It is no longer just about success. It becomes about influence. The desire to shape outcomes. To build something better. To create something that actually works. And this is the turning point. Because now, you are no longer preparing for opportunities. You are preparing to create them. But creating something is very different from working on something. It requires risk. It requires belief. It requires stepping into uncertainty, again. And the stakes are higher now. Because this time, it's not just your growth on the line. It's your credibility, your reputation, your future direction. So you stand at a crossroads. Stay where you are and remain comfortable, or step forward and take on something bigger. This decision is not easy, because both options have a cost. One costs growth, the other costs certainty. And in that moment, you begin to understand something very real. Every meaningful step forward comes with discomfort. This is the third lesson. Growth is not just about learning new things. It is about taking on greater responsibility before you feel ready, because no one ever feels fully ready. They just decide and grow into it. And as we move forward, this decision will become real, not theoretical, not optional, because the next phase is where everything becomes real world. Real risks, real consequences, real pressure. And that is where the true test begins. There is a point in every serious journey where things stop working. Not slowly, not gently, but all at once. At first, it's small signals. A delay here, a mistake there, something that feels slightly off. You notice it, but you ignore it, because everything still looks fine on the outside. But problems don't disappear when ignored. They grow, silently, patiently, until one day, they are too big to hide. And that day feels different. You wake up, and something is wrong. Not clearly visible, but deeply felt. The confidence you once had starts fading. Decisions that used to feel simple now feel heavy. The path that once looked clear now feels uncertain. And for the first time, you don't know what to do next. This is the beginning of the real struggle. Not the kind people talk about on stage. Not the kind that sounds inspiring. But the kind that feels lonely. Because when things are going well, everyone is around. People support you, encourage you, celebrate with you. But when things start breaking, the noise disappears. Advice becomes unclear. Support becomes limited. And slowly, you realize something uncomfortable. You are alone in this. Not physically, but mentally. Because no one else is carrying the same weight. No one else feels the same pressure. No one else has to make the decision that you have to make. And that decision is rarely simple. There are moments when every option feels wrong. Move forward, and you risk failure. Step back, and you lose momentum. Change direction, and you lose time. Stay the same, and things keep getting worse. This is where logic starts failing. Because logic assumes clarity. But here, there is none. And this creates a different kind of stress. Not the stress of working hard, but the stress of not knowing if your effort will even matter. You start questioning everything. Your decisions. Your abilities. Your judgment. You replay past choices in your mind. Was that the mistake? Did I miss something? Could I have done better? And the worst part, there is no clear answer. Because in complex situations, cause and effect are not always obvious. You cannot trace one mistake to one outcome. Everything is connected. Everything influences everything. So instead of clarity, you get doubt. And doubt is dangerous, because it slows you down. It makes you hesitate. It makes you second-guess every move. But hesitation in difficult situations can make things worse. So now you are trapped in a loop. You need to act, but you are unsure. You want clarity, but it is not available. This is where most people break. Not because they are weak, but because they are overwhelmed. They look for escape. They avoid decisions. They delay action. They hope things will fix themselves. But problems don't fix themselves. They demand attention. And if you don't face them early, you will face them later, at a much higher cost. There is another reality that becomes clear in this phase. Effort alone is not enough. You can work longer hours, push harder, try more strategies. But if the direction is wrong, more effort only makes things worse. This realization is painful, because it forces you to accept. Hard work does not guarantee success. You can give everything you have and still be in trouble. And this is where emotional strength becomes more important than skill. Because now, it's not about what you know. It's about how you handle pressure. Do you stay calm or panic? Do you think clearly or react emotionally? Do you face reality or avoid it? These choices define everything. There is one more challenge in this phase. Communication. When things are going wrong, people start guessing. They create their own stories. They assume the worst. And if you stay silent, those assumptions grow. But speaking is not easy, because you don't have all the answers. You are still figuring things out yourself. So what do you say? Do you show confidence, even if you feel uncertain? Do you admit the problem and risk losing trust? This is one of the hardest parts. Balancing truth and stability. Because people don't just need answers. They need direction. They need to feel that someone is in control. And that someone is you. Even if inside, you feel lost. This is the hidden pressure of leadership. You don't get to fall apart publicly. You don't get to show complete uncertainty. You don't get to stop. You carry the pressure so others can continue. And that weight is heavy. But there is a turning point. A moment where you stop looking for easy solutions and start accepting reality as it is. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What needs to be done now?" This shift is powerful because it moves you from emotion to action. You may not have perfect clarity, but you can still take the next step. One decision at a time. One problem at a time. And slowly, things begin to move again. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but forward. This is the fourth lesson. When things fall apart, your job is not to feel ready. Your job is to keep moving, even with doubt, even with fear, even without clear answers. Because stopping is the only guaranteed failure. And as we move ahead, the situation will become even more intense. Because now, it's not just about surviving the problem. It's about making decisions that will directly impact people, their jobs, their lives, their future. And that is where things get even harder. There is a moment when responsibility changes its shape. Before, it was about performance, targets, deadlines, execution. Now, it becomes about people. And people are not predictable. They are not systems you can control. They think, they feel, they react. And every decision you make touches their reality. At first, you don't fully understand this. You think, if I make the right business decisions, everything will be fine. But then, you see the impact. A delayed decision creates uncertainty. A wrong direction wastes someone's effort. A tough call changes someone's future. And suddenly, the weight of leadership feels different. Because now, it's not just about being right. It's about being responsible. There is a difficult truth here. Not every good decision feels good. Sometimes, the right choice hurts people. Sometimes, doing what is necessary means disappointing someone. And this creates a conflict inside you. Because you don't want to hurt people. You don't want to be the reason someone struggles. But leadership does not give you that luxury. There will be moments when you have to choose what is comfortable or what is necessary. And most of the time, those two are not the same. One of the hardest situations you will face is when effort does not match outcome. You see someone working hard, trying their best, putting in time, showing commitment, but the results are not there. And now you are stuck in a painful situation. Do you reward effort, or do you demand results? Because if you ignore results, you risk the future of the entire system. If you ignore effort, you risk losing trust. There is no perfect answer. This is where maturity is tested. You begin to understand. Fairness is not always equal. Treating everyone the same is not always the right approach. Because different situations require different responses. And this is uncomfortable. Because people expect consistency. They expect clarity. They expect decisions to feel fair. But real situations are messy. They don't fit into clean rules. Another challenge appears here. Communication becomes critical. When decisions affect people, silence creates fear. If you don't explain, people assume. If you don't clarify, people create their own stories. And those stories are usually worse than reality. So you are forced to do something difficult. You have to speak clearly, even when the message is uncomfortable. You have to say things people don't want to hear. And this is where many leaders fail. Not because they make wrong decisions, but because they avoid difficult conversations. They delay. They soften the truth. They hope things will improve on their own. But avoiding a hard conversation does not solve the problem. It increases it. Because now, along with the original issue, you also have confusion. And confusion spreads faster than truth. So you learn something important. Clarity is kindness. Even when the message is tough, being clear helps people understand where they stand. It removes uncertainty. It allows them to respond. And over time, people respect clarity more than comfort. There is another painful lesson in this phase. Not everyone will stay. Some people will leave. Some will lose trust. Some will disagree with your decisions. And no matter how much you try, you cannot keep everyone satisfied. This is difficult to accept, because you want to build something strong. You want people to believe in you. But leadership is not about being liked by everyone. It is about doing what is required, even if it creates discomfort. There is a moment that defines this phase. A moment when you realize you are responsible for outcomes, not intentions. You may have good intentions. You may want the best for everyone. But if the results are not right, intentions do not protect you. This realization is heavy, because now, you cannot hide behind effort. You cannot justify with emotion. You are measured by impact. And impact requires difficult choices. At this stage, you begin to change. You become more direct, more aware, more careful with decisions. Not because you want control, but because you understand the consequences. Every choice creates a ripple, and that ripple affects more than you can see. So you slow down, not in action, but in thinking. You consider outcomes. You think beyond the immediate moment. You start asking, what happens next? What happens after that? Who does this affect? And this is where leadership deepens. It is no longer about solving problems quickly. It is about solving them responsibly. And responsibility is not light. It stays with you, even after decisions are made. Even after situations move on. You remember the people, the conversations, the moments where you had to choose. And these memories shape you. They make you stronger, but also more aware. This is the fifth lesson. Leadership is not about control. It is about carrying the weight of decisions that affect other people's lives. And as we move forward, the challenges will not reduce. They will evolve. Because now, it's not just about handling situations. It's about building something, while everything around you is unstable. And that requires a different level of strength. There is a big difference between facing a problem and living inside one. Before, challenges came in moments. You dealt with them. You recovered. You moved forward. But now, there is no break. One issue ends. Another begins. One decision is made. Another waits. There is no clear line between calm and crisis anymore. Everything starts blending together. And this creates a different kind of exhaustion. Not physical. Mental. Because your mind never fully rests. Even when you are not working, you are thinking. Thinking about what could go wrong. Thinking about what you missed. Thinking about what is coming next. And slowly, you begin to feel something dangerous. Loss of control. Not because you are incapable, but because too many variables are moving at the same time. People are reacting. Situations are shifting. Outcomes are unpredictable. And you realize you cannot control everything. This is a difficult acceptance, because earlier you believed that with enough effort you could manage things, but now you see the limits. And this is where many people make a critical mistake. They try to control more. They tighten everything. They monitor every detail. They question every move. They try to be involved in everything. It feels like responsibility, but in reality, it creates pressure everywhere. Because when you try to control everything, you slow everything down. People stop thinking for themselves. They wait for instructions. They hesitate. And suddenly, you become the bottleneck. Now the system depends on you for everything. And that is not strength. That is fragility. Because if you stop, everything stops. This realization is uncomfortable, because it forces you to rethink your role. Are you here to control, or to build something that can function without constant control? This is the shift from doing to enabling. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" you begin asking, "How do I create a system that fixes this?" This changes everything. You stop focusing only on immediate problems. You start focusing on structure. How decisions are made. How information flows. How people respond under pressure. Because chaos is not always caused by external problems. Sometimes, it is caused by weak systems. If people don't know what to do, if roles are unclear, if communication is broken, even small issues become big. So instead of reacting to chaos, you start designing stability. But stability is not created by rules alone. It is created by clarity. Clarity of roles. Clarity of expectations. Clarity of priorities. When people know what matters, they act better. When they understand why something is important, they take ownership. And slowly, the environment begins to change. Not perfectly, but noticeably. There is another important realization in this phase. You cannot do everything yourself. Not because you don't want to, but because it is impossible. So you have to trust others. And trust is not easy, because trust involves risk. What if they make mistakes? What if they don't understand? What if they fail? These questions are real. But avoiding trust creates a bigger problem. Because without trust, nothing scales. You remain stuck at your own capacity. So you begin to take calculated risks. You delegate. You allow others to make decisions. You give responsibility. And yes, mistakes happen. But something else happens too. People grow. They learn. They adapt. They become stronger. And over time, the system becomes less dependent on you. This is progress, but it requires patience. Because in the beginning, it feels slower. You see errors. You see inefficiencies. You feel like you could do it faster yourself. But if you keep doing everything, nothing changes. So you hold back. You guide, instead of controlling. And this is harder than it sounds. Because letting go of control feels like losing power. But in reality, it is creating capacity. Another challenge appears here. Consistency. When things are chaotic, it is easy to react differently each time. One day you are calm. Another day you are frustrated. Another day you are silent. And people notice this. They start adjusting based on your mood, instead of the situation. And that creates instability. So you learn something critical. Your behavior sets the tone. If you are stable, people feel stable. If you panic, people panic. This does not mean you have no emotions. It means you manage them. Because leadership is not just about decisions. It is about presence. How you show up affects how others respond. And in difficult environments, this matters even more. Slowly, you begin to develop control. Not over everything, but over what truly matters. Your thinking, your responses, your priorities. And that is enough. Because you don't need to control the entire system. You need to guide it. This is the sixth lesson. Chaos is not something you escape. It is something you learn to operate within. And to do that, you must shift from controlling outcomes to building systems that handle outcomes. As we move forward, things will become even more intense. Because now, external pressure will increase. Competition, market shifts, unexpected challenges, and what you have built so far will be tested, not in theory, but in reality. And that is where the next phase begins. Up until now, most of your battles were inside your mind, inside your team, inside your system. But now, the outside world enters the picture. And the outside world does not care about your effort. It does not care how hard you worked. It does not care what you planned. It does not care what you intended to build. It only responds to one thing: results. This is where reality becomes sharp. Because now, you are not comparing yourself to your past. You are being compared to others. Other companies. Other teams. Other people, trying to win the same game. And competition changes everything. Because now, mistakes are not just internal problems. They become disadvantages. If you move slowly, someone else moves faster. If you hesitate, someone else takes the opportunity. If you get comfortable, someone else becomes aggressive. And suddenly, time feels different. It feels faster, more urgent, more demanding. Decisions that could wait before now need to be made quickly. But speed creates risk. Because fast decisions are not always the best decisions. So you are stuck again. Move fast and risk being wrong. Move slow and risk being left behind. This tension becomes constant. There is another pressure that begins to build. Expectations. Not just from yourself, but from others. People start looking at you as someone who should know, someone who should lead, someone who should deliver. And expectations are heavy because they don't come with instructions. Everyone wants progress. Everyone wants results. Everyone wants clarity. But no one sees how uncertain things actually are. So you carry two realities at the same time. On the outside, you are expected to be confident. On the inside, you are managing uncertainty. This gap is exhausting because you cannot fully express doubt. You cannot openly show confusion. You have to hold it together, even when things are not fully together. There is a moment in this phase where you feel the pressure peak, not because of one big problem, but because of multiple pressures happening together. Competition rising, resources limited, people expecting answers, time running out, and you realize this is not temporary. This is the environment now. This is what it means to operate at a higher level. There is no safe zone, no pause button, no guaranteed recovery time, only continuous pressure. At this point, your mindset becomes critical. If you see pressure as a threat, you start shrinking. You become defensive. You avoid risks. You try to protect what you have. But in competitive environments, defense is not enough. Because while you are protecting, someone else is attacking. So you must shift your thinking from protecting position to creating advantage. And advantage does not come from playing safe. It comes from making bold, calculated moves. But bold moves require belief. Belief in your direction. Belief in your decisions. Belief in your ability to recover if things go wrong. Without that belief, you hesitate. And hesitation, in competitive situations, is costly. There is another challenge here. Information overload. As pressure increases, so does input. More data, more opinions, more signals. Everyone has advice. Everyone has a perspective. Everyone thinks they know what should be done. And if you try to listen to everything, you lose clarity. Because not all information is useful. Not all opinions are correct. So you must develop a filter. The ability to decide what matters and what doesn't. What to act on and what to ignore. This is not easy. Because sometimes the loudest voice is not the right one. And sometimes the right signal is hidden in noise. So you rely on something deeper. Your judgment. The same judgment you have been building through experience. And now it is being tested. Every decision matters more. Every mistake feels heavier. But something else happens too. You become sharper. You start recognizing patterns. You start seeing signals earlier. You start anticipating problems before they fully appear. This is growth under pressure. Not comfortable, but powerful. There is one more reality in this phase. You cannot win every time. No matter how good you are, no matter how hard you try, there will be losses. Deals that don't work, plans that fail, moves that don't succeed. And these losses can affect your confidence if you let them, because failure at this level feels different. It is more visible, more impactful, more difficult to ignore. But you learn something important. Failure is not the end. It is information. It tells you what doesn't work. It shows you where you misjudged. It reveals gaps you didn't see before. And if you can learn quickly, you can adjust. And adjustment is survival. Because in fast-moving environments, the one who adapts faster wins. Not the smartest, not the strongest, but the most adaptable. This is the seventh lesson. When external pressure rises, you cannot control the environment, but you can control how you respond to it. You can choose to shrink or to evolve, and that choice repeats every day. As we move forward, the pressure will not reduce. It will intensify, because now we are entering the phase where survival is no longer assumed. It must be earned, and that is where the real test begins. There comes a point when the situation stops being manageable. Not because you didn't try, not because you didn't plan, but because too many things have gone wrong at the same time. Resources start tightening, time starts shrinking, options start disappearing, and suddenly you are no longer choosing between good and bad. You are choosing between bad and worse. This is the moment most people are never prepared for, because everything you were taught assumed that there is always a right answer. But here, there is none. Only trade-offs. If you move in one direction, something breaks. If you move in another, something else suffers. And no matter what you choose, there will be consequences. This is where leadership becomes deeply uncomfortable, because now you cannot avoid damage. You can only decide where it happens. One of the hardest realities in this phase is letting go. Letting go of plans. Letting go of expectations. Sometimes, letting go of people. And nothing about this feels right, because you remember the effort, the time, the trust that was built. You remember conversations, promises, moments where you believed everything would work. And now, you are the one breaking that direction. This creates a heavy internal conflict. Part of you wants to hold on, to give it one more chance, to believe that things will turn around. But another part, the part that sees reality clearly, knows that holding on longer will make things worse. This is the moment where emotion and logic collide. Emotion says, "Don't do this. It's too harsh." Logic says, "If you don't do this, everything could collapse." And you are standing in the middle. No guide, no reassurance, just a decision that only you can make. There is something very important to understand here. Delaying a hard decision does not make it easier. It makes it more expensive. Problems grow. Damage increases. Options reduce even further. So waiting is not neutral. It is also a decision. And often, it is the worst one. So you act. Not because you feel ready. Not because you feel confident. But because not acting is no longer acceptable. And when you take that action, it hurts. There is no relief. No immediate sense of success. Only silence. A heavy silence. Because, something has changed. This is the part no one celebrates. There are no success stories about this moment. No applause. No recognition. Just the quiet understanding that leadership sometimes requires you to carry pain. There is another difficult truth here. People will not always understand your decisions. From their perspective, it may seem unfair, unexpected, even wrong, and you cannot always explain everything, because some factors are too complex, too sensitive, too interconnected. So you face judgment, and that judgment can feel personal, because you care. You don't want to be seen as someone who makes harmful choices. But leadership is not about perception. It is about reality. And sometimes, reality is harsh. At this stage, your emotional strength is tested more than ever. Because you must remain steady, even when things feel unstable. You must continue forward, even when you are carrying doubt. You must support others, even when you are not fully okay yourself. This is not easy. There will be moments when you question yourself deeply. Did I do the right thing? Was there another way? Could I have handled this better? And these questions don't disappear quickly. They stay. They repeat. They challenge your confidence. But over time, something changes. You begin to understand that perfection was never an option. You stop looking for flawless decisions. You start focusing on necessary ones. And this shift is important, because it allows you to move forward without being stuck in regret. There is another realization in this phase. Strength is not about feeling strong. It is about continuing when you don't feel strong. It is about showing up when everything inside you feels heavy. It is about holding responsibility even when it hurts. And slowly, you begin to rebuild. Not everything at once, but piece by piece. You reassess. You adjust. You create new direction. Because survival is not just about avoiding collapse. It is about creating a path forward from a difficult place. And that requires clarity. Clarity about what matters most. Clarity about what must be protected. Clarity about what can be sacrificed. These are not easy choices, but they are necessary. This is the 8th lesson. When there are no good options, your role is not to find the perfect solution. Your role is to choose the path that keeps the future alive, even if the present becomes painful. As we move ahead, things will begin to stabilize, not because problems disappear, but because you become stronger, more aware, more decisive, more grounded, and from that strength, a new phase begins. Not easier, but clearer. After chaos, there is a strange silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes after something intense has passed. The urgency reduces. The constant panic slows down. And for the first time in a long while, you get space to think. But this space is not empty. It is filled with reflection. You look back at everything that happened. The decisions, the mistakes, the moments where things almost broke. And slowly, you start seeing patterns. Not random events, but connected outcomes. You begin to understand. This didn't happen suddenly. It was building over time. Small issues that were ignored. Signals that were missed. Assumptions that were never questioned. And this realization is powerful. Because now, you are no longer just reacting. You are learning. Learning not just what went wrong, but why it went wrong. This is the difference between surviving and evolving. Many people survive difficult phases. Very few take the time to understand them deeply. Because understanding requires honesty. You have to look at your own decisions, your own blind spots, your own role in the situation. And that is uncomfortable. It is easier to blame circumstances. To say, the situation was bad. The timing was wrong. External factors caused this. But real growth begins when you ask, what did I miss? This question changes everything. Because now, you are not a victim of the situation. You are a participant in it. And participants can improve. There is another shift happening here. You start moving from reaction to design. Before, you were responding to problems. Now, you are thinking about prevention. How do I make sure this doesn't happen again? What systems were missing? What signals should I have paid attention to? This is where structure begins to form. Not rigid rules, but thoughtful systems. Systems that create clarity. Systems that reduce confusion. Systems that allow people to act without constant guidance. Because you have learned something important. Chaos is not always caused by big events. It is often the result of small misalignments, left unaddressed. So you focus on alignment. Alignment in goals. Alignment in expectations. Alignment in communication. When people understand the same direction, things move smoother. There is another important realization in this phase. Speed without structure is dangerous. Earlier, moving fast felt like progress. Now, you understand the cost of moving fast without clarity. Mistakes multiply. Confusion spreads. Energy gets wasted. So you slow down, but only in thinking. Your actions become more precise, more intentional. You don't rush decisions. You examine them. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because now you know, a single wrong move can create long-term consequences. There is also a change in how you see people. Before, you focused on effort. Now, you focus on fit. Not everyone is suited for every role. Not everyone grows at the same pace. Not everyone aligns with the direction. And this is not about judging people. It is about understanding placement, putting the right people in the right roles, because even strong individuals can struggle in the wrong environment, and even average performers can excel in the right setup. So you start paying attention to this. Who is where, why they are there, and whether it makes sense. This is not easy, because it involves change, and change always creates discomfort. But avoiding change creates bigger problems later. There is another layer to rebuilding. Trust. After a difficult phase, trust is fragile. People may still feel uncertain. They may still remember past instability. And trust is not rebuilt through words. It is rebuilt through consistency. Small actions. Repeated behavior. Clear decisions. Over time, people begin to feel stable again. Not because everything is perfect, but because things are predictable. And predictability creates confidence. There is also a shift inside you. You become less reactive, less emotional in decision-making. Not because you don't care, but because you understand the impact of uncontrolled reactions. You develop discipline in thinking, in communication, in execution. This discipline becomes your foundation. Because situations will change again. Challenges will return. But now, you are better prepared. Not because you can control everything, but because you can handle complexity better. This is the 9th lesson. Recovery is not about returning to where you were. It is about building something stronger from what you have learned. And that requires reflection, structure, and intentional change. As we move forward, the journey will take another turn. Because stability creates a new challenge. Growth, and growth, brings its own set of problems. Bigger decisions, bigger risks, bigger expectations. And this time, the stakes will be even higher. There is a moment after recovery, when things start working again. Not perfectly, but steadily. Progress becomes visible. Decisions begin to show results. Systems start holding. People begin to perform with more clarity. From the outside, it looks like success is coming back. But inside, you know something has changed. Because growth after struggle is not the same as growth before struggle. Before, growth felt exciting, fast, energetic, full of possibility. Now, it feels heavier, because you understand the cost of losing control. You understand how quickly things can fall apart. So instead of chasing speed, you start thinking about sustainability. How do we grow without breaking again? How do we expand without losing clarity? How do we move forward without repeating past mistakes? These questions define this phase, because growth introduces complexity. More people, more decisions, more moving parts, and complexity creates distance. Distance between teams, distance between information and action, distance between intention and execution. What used to be simple now requires coordination. What used to be direct now needs structure. And if you don't manage this properly, things start slipping again. But this time, the problems are harder to detect, because everything still looks like progress. Numbers may be improving. Activity may be increasing. Energy may feel high. But underneath, misalignment can quietly build. And this is dangerous, because growth can hide problems. When things are moving fast, small cracks are easy to ignore. But over time, those cracks expand. And if left unchecked, they lead to the same kind of instability you faced before. So now, your focus changes again. From fixing problems to preventing them at scale. This requires a different mindset. You cannot rely only on instinct anymore. You need systems that work even when you are not directly involved. Because as things grow, your personal reach becomes limited. You cannot be everywhere. You cannot monitor everything. So the question becomes, how does the organization function without depending on me for every decision? This is where true leadership begins. Not in doing more, but in building something that does more without you. There is a challenge here. Letting go, again. But this time, it is deeper. Before, you were letting go of control over tasks. Now, you are letting go of control over outcomes. You create direction. You build systems. You set expectations. But you allow others to operate within that framework. And this requires trust at a higher level. Because now, the impact of others' decisions is bigger. If they succeed, growth accelerates. If they fail, the consequences are wider. So you invest more in people, not just in what they do, but in how they think. You focus on alignment of mindset, how they approach problems, how they make decisions, how they handle pressure. Because skills can be taught, but thinking patterns define long-term outcomes. There is another shift happening. Communication becomes more intentional. Before, you could speak directly to everyone. Now, messages must travel through layers. And with every layer, there is a risk. Messages can change. Meaning can shift. Clarity can reduce. So you learn to communicate differently. Not just clearly, but consistently. Repeating key ideas. Reinforcing priorities. Making sure the core message stays intact. Because in larger systems, clarity is not achieved once. It must be maintained. There is also a new kind of decision-making required. Earlier, you made decisions based on immediate impact. Now, you think in terms of long-term consequences. How will this scale? What happens when this grows? Will this still work at a larger level? Because not everything that works in a small setup works in a larger one. Some processes break. Some approaches fail. Some assumptions become invalid. So you begin to redesign. Not from scratch, but from experience, taking what worked and adapting it for scale. This requires patience, because building for growth is slower than reacting to problems. But it is stronger. There is another emotional challenge here. Expectation of consistency. When things start improving, people expect them to keep improving. They expect stability, predictability, continuous progress. And this creates pressure, because growth is not linear. There will still be fluctuations, still be challenges, still be moments of uncertainty. But now, those moments feel more intense, because expectations are higher. So you must manage not just reality, but perception, helping people understand that growth includes ups and downs, that stability does not mean perfection, that progress is not always smooth. This requires transparency, not hiding problems, but framing them correctly, so people stay aligned, even when things are not ideal. And slowly, a new level of leadership forms, more strategic, more structured, more aware, not driven by urgency alone, but guided by intention. This is the 10th lesson. Growth is not just about moving forward. It is about building something that can continue moving forward, even as complexity increases. And that requires a shift from personal effort to organizational strength. As we move ahead, the journey will take another turn, because with growth comes a new challenge. People dynamics at scale, politics, power, misalignment of interests. And this is where leadership becomes even more complex. When a system is small, everything feels direct. You know who is doing what. You understand how decisions are made. You can sense problems early. But as things grow, something changes. The system becomes layered. More people, more roles, more levels of decision-making. And with that comes distance. Distance between intention and action. Distance between what is said and what is understood. Distance between what is right and what actually happens. This is where people dynamics begin to shape outcomes more than processes. Because systems don't act. People do. And people bring more than skills. They bring perspectives, ambitions, egos, insecurities. All of these start interacting, sometimes in alignment, and sometimes in conflict. At first, these conflicts are small. Differences in opinion, disagreements in approach. But if not managed, they grow, not into open arguments, but into silent resistance. People start holding back, avoiding difficult conversations, working in their own direction, instead of a shared one. And this is dangerous, because everything still looks functional. Work is happening, meetings are happening, decisions are being made. But underneath, alignment is breaking, and misalignment is one of the most expensive problems in any system, because it wastes energy. People move in different directions. Effort increases, but results don't. And this creates frustration. Now, another layer appears. Power. Not formal power. Not titles. But influence. Who people listen to. Whose opinion carries weight. Who shapes decisions, even without authority. This kind of power is subtle. It does not show up in org charts. But it affects everything. If used well, it strengthens the system. If misused, it creates imbalance. Decisions become biased. Voices get ignored. Some perspectives dominate, while others disappear. And over time, this leads to internal politics. Not the obvious kind, but the quiet kind, where people start optimizing for themselves. Instead of the system, they protect their position. They defend their ideas, even when wrong. They avoid accountability, and this shifts the culture from collaboration to competition within. This is one of the hardest things to detect, because it doesn't break instantly. It slowly weakens the foundation, and if ignored, it spreads. So now, your role changes again. You are no longer just managing growth. You are managing alignment between people, and this requires a different skill. Not just decision-making, but observation. You have to see what is not being said. Notice behavior patterns. Understand motivations. Identify where friction is building. Because problems at this stage are rarely visible on the surface. They exist in conversations, in tone, in hesitation. And if you miss these signals, they become bigger issues later. There is another challenge here. Fairness. As systems grow, people compare. They compare roles, recognition, opportunities, and perception matters. Even if decisions are logical, if they feel unfair, trust breaks. So you must balance two things: making the right decision and making sure it is understood. This is not easy, because not everyone sees the full picture. But communication helps. Explaining reasoning, sharing context, being transparent where possible. This reduces misunderstanding. Another important shift happens here. You start defining culture intentionally. Before, culture happened naturally. Now, it must be guided, because with more people, default behavior becomes inconsistent. So you reinforce values, not through words alone, but through actions. What you reward, what you tolerate, what you correct. These signals shape behavior. And behavior creates culture. There is also a difficult responsibility: addressing misalignment directly. When someone is not aligned, you cannot ignore it, even if they are talented, even if they contribute, because misalignment spreads. And if left unchecked, it damages the entire system. So you act, not emotionally, but clearly. You address the issue. You reset expectations. You make decisions when needed. And yes, this creates discomfort. But avoiding discomfort creates long-term damage. There is another realization here. You cannot control how people feel, but you can influence how the system operates. You create clarity. You create structure. You create an environment where the right behavior is supported. And over time, things begin to stabilize again. Not because conflicts disappear, but because they are managed better. This is the 11th lesson. As systems grow, people dynamics become the defining factor. Not just strategy, not just execution, but how people interact, how they align, how they influence outcomes. And managing this requires awareness, clarity, and courage. As we move forward, the journey becomes even more intense, because now, you are not just managing people and systems. You are defining direction at a level where decisions shape the future itself. And that brings a new kind of pressure. There is a moment when you stop thinking in days and start thinking in years, not because you want to, but because you have to. The system has grown. The impact has expanded. And now, every major decision carries long-term consequences. Earlier, you were solving immediate problems. Now, you are defining direction. Direction is different. A problem has a clear boundary. It can be identified, analyzed, solved. But direction is open-ended. There is no single correct path, no guaranteed outcome, only possibilities. And choosing between possibilities is far more difficult than solving problems. Because now, you are not just deciding what to do. You are deciding what not to do. And what you choose to ignore can be as important as what you choose to pursue. There is a pressure here. The pressure to be right. Because at this level, mistakes are expensive. Not just in terms of time or effort, but in terms of opportunity. Choosing one path means leaving others behind. And sometimes, you don't immediately know which one is better. This creates hesitation. You want more data, more clarity, more certainty. But certainty at this level rarely exists, so you are forced to decide with incomplete information. This is uncomfortable, because now your decisions are based on judgment, not proof, and judgment is built on experience, intuition, and understanding. But it is never perfect, so you accept something important. You will not always be right, but you must still decide. There is another challenge here. Vision. Not a vague idea, not a motivational statement, but a clear sense of where things should go. Because without direction, growth becomes random. People move, but not together. Effort increases, but impact remains scattered. So you define direction, not in extreme detail, but in clear intent. Where are we going? What matters most? What are we trying to build? And this direction must be understood by others, because a vision that stays in your mind has no impact. It must be communicated, repeated, reinforced, so that people can align their actions with the bigger goal. There is also a difficult balance here. Flexibility and commitment. You must stay committed to a direction, but flexible in how you reach it, because the path will change. New challenges will appear. New information will come. And if you are too rigid, you break. But if you are too flexible, you drift. So you learn to balance. Hold the vision steady. Adjust the approach. This is not easy, because it requires constant awareness. You cannot just decide once and move on. You must continuously observe. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we adapting where needed? Are we staying aligned? This is ongoing work. There is another layer to this phase. Responsibility becomes broader. Earlier, your decisions affected your team. Now, they affect a larger system. More people, more stakeholders, more consequences. And this increases pressure, because the impact of mistakes is wider. So you become more thoughtful, not slower in action, but deeper in thinking. You consider second-order effects, not just what happens immediately, but what happens next, and after that. Because long-term direction is shaped by cumulative decisions, small choices, repeated over time. There is also an emotional shift. You become more patient, not because things are easier, but because you understand time differently. Some results take longer. Some changes need consistency. You stop expecting immediate outcomes. You focus on sustained progress. And this creates stability. There is another important realization. You cannot predict everything. No matter how much you plan, uncertainty remains. Markets change. Situations evolve. Unexpected events occur. So instead of trying to predict everything, you build adaptability. Systems that can adjust. People who can respond. Structures that can evolve. Because the future is not fixed. It is shaped over time. And your role is to guide that process, not control it completely. This is the 12th lesson. Leadership at scale is not about having all the answers. It is about setting direction and continuously adjusting. As reality unfolds, as we move forward, the journey approaches its final phase. Not an ending, but a deeper understanding. Because after everything, there is one final realization left about what all of this truly means. Not just in business, but in life. After everything you have gone through, the struggle, the pressure, the decisions, the losses, the rebuilding, there is a moment of stillness. Not because everything is perfect, but because you have changed. The same situations that once felt overwhelming now feel familiar. Not easy, but understandable. You no longer react the same way. Where there was panic, there is now pause. Where there was confusion, there is now clarity of thought. Where there was doubt, there is now acceptance. Not blind confidence, but quiet confidence. The kind that does not need to prove anything, because it has already been tested. There is a powerful realization here. The journey was never about controlling outcomes. It was about developing the ability to handle whatever comes, because outcomes are never fully in your control. You can plan, you can execute, you can prepare, but reality will always introduce variables, unexpected shifts, unplanned challenges, moments that test you in ways you did not anticipate. And earlier, this uncertainty felt like a threat. No. It feels like part of the process. You stop resisting it. You start working with it. This is a fundamental shift, because resistance creates stress. Acceptance creates clarity, and clarity allows better action. There is another realization. The hardest moments were the most valuable, not because they were enjoyable, but because they forced growth. They removed assumptions. They exposed weaknesses. They demanded change. Without those moments, you would still be operating at a lower level, more comfortable, but less capable. So you stop wishing for an easy path. You understand that difficulty is part of building strength. There is also a deeper understanding of leadership now. It is not about control. It is not about authority. It is not about always being right. It is about responsibility. The responsibility to decide, even when it is difficult. The responsibility to act, even when there is uncertainty. The responsibility to stand steady when others are looking for direction. And most importantly, the responsibility to continue, because stopping is always an option. Walking away is always easier in the short term, but continuing requires commitment, not just to the goal, but to the process. There is another important shift. You become less attached to being right and more focused on finding what works. Earlier, being correct felt important. No. Progress feels more important. So you listen more. You observe more. You adjust faster. Because your identity is no longer tied to your ideas. It is tied to outcomes. This creates flexibility. You are willing to change direction when needed. You are willing to admit mistakes without losing confidence. You are willing to evolve. And this ability is what allows long-term success. There is also a shift in how you see others. You understand people better, not just their actions, but their motivations. You recognize that everyone is dealing with their own pressures, their own fears, their own limitations. This creates empathy, not softness, but understanding. And this understanding helps you lead better, because leadership is not just about decisions. It is about people, and people do not respond only to logic. They respond to clarity, to consistency, to trust, and you have learned how to build that. Not perfectly, but intentionally. There is one final realization. There is no finish line. No moment where everything becomes easy. No point where challenges disappear. Every level brings new problems. But now, that does not feel discouraging. It feels natural, because you are no longer expecting ease. You are prepared for difficulty, and that preparation is your strength. You understand that success is not a permanent state. It is something that must be maintained, protected, adapted, and that requires continuous effort. But now, effort does not feel like a burden. It feels like part of who you are. You are no longer chasing a goal. You are operating at a level where you can handle pressure, make decisions, build systems, lead people, adapt to change, and most importantly, continue moving forward. This is the final lesson. The hard part is not reaching a certain point. The hard part is becoming the kind of person who can handle what comes with it. Because success is not defined by what you achieve. It is defined by what you can sustain. And sustaining something meaningful requires strength that is built over time. Through struggle, through decisions, through responsibility. And now, you carry that strength, not as something visible, but as something real, something that shows in how you think, how you act, how you respond. And as this journey closes, there is no dramatic ending, no final victory moment, just a quiet understanding that you are ready, not for a perfect future, but for whatever comes next. And that is enough.